Welcome to the Korea Pro Podcast, your weekly guide to understanding the most pressing and complicated developments shaping South Korea. We're your hosts, Jungmin Kim,
John Lei,
and Joon Ha Park of Korea Pro.
Go beyond headlines as we explain not just what happened, but also what really matters and why it matters.
If you monitor South Korea for work or just trying to keep up, you're in the right place.
This is the Korea Pro Podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Korea Pro Podcast. It is now Thursday, November 20th. It's a little after 2 p.m. Joon Ha, you guys were not able to discuss the joint fact sheet when it came out last week, right?
Yeah, so mainly due to the fact that it came out on Friday last week, so November 14th. It was a long-awaited joint fact sheet.
2 weeks.
2 weeks since the October 29th Gyeongju summit, and also the corresponding week after summit between Hegseth and An Gyubek, the South Korean defense minister, and his U.S. counterpart. So South Korea has agreed to spend nearly about $60 billion US dollars to purchase U.S. military equipment and also support the USFK, U.S. Forces Korea.
Comprehensive support for USFK, whatever that means.
Right. So the readout does confirm agreements that the South Korean President Lee Jae-myung and U.S. President Donald Trump made during their October 29th summit. So they're saying that Seoul will spend $25 billion on military equipment purchases by 2030, as well as provide comprehensive support for U.S. Forces Korea worth $33 billion at an unspecified date.
Okay, so first question. That's a lot of money of purchasing U.S. equipment. I'm sure Donald Trump was very pleased with that. But, as everyone knows, South Korea is also a defense manufacturer. We build planes, we build tanks, we build multiple rocket launchers and everything. What exactly is South Korea going to be purchasing from the U.S. with all of this money?
Right. So Seoul has reportedly provided Washington with a comprehensive wish list. So they're seeking 20 additional F-35A Lightning II fighters, upgrades to the F-35A that they currently have within their Air Force, and also a modernization of the Patriot PAC-3 systems.
Okay, so a lot of the high-end stuff that South Korea itself cannot usually just manufacture on their own and require significant U.S. investments. Okay, so fine, easy question. But the other question that I've got is a bit more political. It has to do with the special measures agreements, the one that South Korea and the U.S. signed in October 2024. So according to that SMA, South Korea agreed to contribute up to $1.13 billion per year and contribute 8% more per year depending on the country's CPI, the Consumer Price Index. But this, as you mentioned, is $60 billion. That's 60 times more than what South Korea agreed to spend on. Now, of course, the SMA was $1.13 billion per year.
Yep.
This $60 billion agreement, how long is it going to last for? Is it for a decade? Is it going to last for 20 years? How long are we talking about here?
Yeah, so it's not like $60 billion as a whole for USFK. So the USFK will be having $33 billion, of course, in support. But it remains unclear at the moment, and it was not specified within the joint fact sheet regarding whether the newly announced $33 billion will replace the current SMA figure.
So all of this talk that we've been having since 2024 about Trump-proofing the special measures agreements, that's completely out the window now. That's gone.
So if you look at the Security Consultative Meeting communique that came out on the same day, very late, much to all of the reporters' annoyance, it does not state anything about revising the SMA, and also just falls in line with or reiterates what the joint fact sheet was basically saying that it will see Seoul's increased support for U.S. Forces Korea without specifying a particular date.
Okay, speaking of the SCM communique, now what does that really say about OPCON transfer? Because the South Korean government has been saying repeatedly that South Korea wants to have that wartime OPCON transfer by the end of the President Lee Jae-myung's administration.
Right. So it's an ambition that's, as you said, been reiterated multiple times. Of course, we haven't heard it from the mouths of the U.S. administration just yet. But of course, within the Security Consultative Meeting communique that came out last Friday as well, you saw both sides agreeing to South Korea's expediting of the OPCON transfer process under the current conditions-based transfer forms.
Okay. But of course, what everyone really wants to know about, everyone from Timbuktu to London really, is about those nuclear-powered submarines. Now, I was under the impression that this was really just a talking point, that in order to actually have this nuclear power submarines being built wherever it's going to be built, it will also require congressional authorization. So
Right.
I was saying to people, both in person and on my analyses, that this is really just a talking point, that this is nothing more than a handshake. But since that October 29 meeting, there have been a lot of developments regarding these nuclear submarines. Is it really gaining much more traction now?
Yeah, so it is the talk of the day, of course, and it was very elementary approval, just one sentence saying that the nuclear-powered attack submarines to be built by South Korea will be approved by the Trump administration, and then they will move forward with agreements moving forward. But of course, the National Security Advisor from South Korea, Lee Sung-lak, told reporters that most specifics on the enrichment, also how much uranium will be approved by the United States, where the submarine will be built, that's all still up in the air. Lee Sung-lak and President Lee were saying that, it's definitely going to be built in South Korea, but we haven't heard anything from the U.S. administration yet.
All right, so a well-oiled machine that's just moving along fantastically.
Absolutely. And just moving on to the economic front then. So there were quite a number of clauses that came out. Of course, you saw the ironing out of what they agreed on October 29th and what was briefed on by Lee Sung-lak and the presidential policy chief Kim Yong-bum just then. But they also had a specific clause that you put attention to, the one about semiconductors. Can you talk us a bit about that?
Sure. So regarding the tariff talks, what we have seen with the presidential policy chief Kim Yong-bum and National Security Advisor Lee Sung-lak saying was that they really tended to focus on the $200 billion investment package and how it's been really divided into a 10-year installment plan, $20 billion per year. But what's been slightly less emphasized is the semiconductor clause. Now, I'm going to read that clause that was published at the White House website. And now this is what it says. Quote, "For any Section 232 tariffs imposed on semiconductors, including semiconductor manufacturing equipment, the United States intends to provide terms for such Section 232 tariffs on Korea that are no less favorable than terms that may be offered in a future agreement covering a volume of semiconductor trade at least as large as Korea's as determined by the United States."
Right.
So the question is, what does this mean? Okay, so basically what this means is that the U.S. is going to provide terms for Korea that are, again, quote, no less favorable than those offered in any future agreement with a partner whose semiconductor trade volumes equals or exceeds South Korea's. So when we think about countries whose semiconductor volume exports or production is equal to or greater than South Korea, really there's only one country that comes to mind, and that's Taiwan. The joint fact sheet... TSMC, exactly. The joint fact sheet never explicitly mentions Taiwan, but it's there. It's just not said out loud. If you want to think about the entire foundry business, Samsung is number 2 globally when it comes to foundry business, and the global market share for Samsung is 7%. Number 1 is TSMC, which is about 66%. And so what this really means is that since no country surpasses Taiwan in fabrication scale or advanced logic leadership, Taiwan is now the implicit benchmark. So because this set is about future semiconductor deals, what this means is that if Taiwan, say, it's able to negotiate with the U.S. and is able to secure, say, enhanced access to advanced AI chips like the Blackwell chips that Nvidia is producing, or if it can get lower tariffs in exchange for, say, moving production facilities from Taiwan to somewhere in the United States, South Korea will come under significant pressure to either increase spending or make significant innovative breakthroughs in the semiconductor business sector, or just to maintain access or parity with Taiwan. Now, as we just mentioned, TSMC has far outpaced Samsung Electronics or SK Hynix when it comes to global foundry, global market share. And so South Korea is at a significant disadvantage. If TSMC is able to say one day that, okay, we are willing to make some concessions that will make Donald Trump happy, South Korean firms will be at a significant disadvantage.
So what is the presidential policy chief? What is the trade minister doing to actually maneuver around this here?
I have no idea what Seoul is doing right now. Now, the sort of good news that we've seen is that just today, the Commerce Department in the U.S., they authorized the Blackwell chips to be sold to Saudi Arabia and the UAE. And also there were reports that the White House is going to delay the semiconductor tariffs that they had been talking about for months now. So that's going to offer some short-term stability.
Okay.
Because if the Saudis and the Emiratis are able to get those access to Blackwell chips, South Korea will be able to get those chips as well. And so in the short term, there is some flexibility, and we are likely going to see some moves in the Kospi in a more positive direction. It's been going down a little bit over the past few days. But yeah, in the long term, this is not something that's really just state-to-state policy or trade talks will be able to resolve. It's going to come down to how much South Korean companies themselves will be able to innovate. And what we've seen over the past few years is that South Korean companies just have not been able to compete when it comes to semiconductors or chips, when it comes to, competing with Taiwan.
We'll see how that fleshes out. And South Korean President Lee Jae-myung, he also held a summit with the UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan on Tuesday. Can you tell us a little more about that and what they agreed to expand cooperation on?
Okay, so when it comes to the UAE, obviously the first thing that we're talking about is energy, right? Because the UAE is an energy-producing country, LNG, gas, hydrogen. Also, South Korea and the UAE have the Baraka nuclear power plant that South Korea built. And so energy is going to be a big part of it. And they also talk about SEPA, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement. But these are all really just procedural. The really big thing that, again, came to my mind, again, is because it's a sector that I'm looking at right now, is, again, AI cooperation.
Sure.
Now, the UAE has got this Stargate UAE, which is the offshoot of OpenAI Stargate project.
Sure.
And the UAE has really grand ambitions to become a Middle Eastern AI data center powerhouse. And as anyone who's been following data center news would know implicitly, data centers, especially AI data centers, these are just energy-sucking machines. But because of how much energy that the UAE is able to independently produce, the UAE is in a very good position to supply the energy, and South Korea is in a very good position to supply the chips that are necessary to, become part of this larger AI data center ecosystem in the UAE. And so this is going to have a bit of a symbiotic effect.
Sure.
And now everyone's been talking about how this AI market, this global AI market is a bubble. Eventually, and people are talking about how this market is likely going to peak by the end of next year. But that's talking about hyperscalers like Amazon or Google or Meta in the US.
So where does Stargate play in that then?
Exactly. Stargate UAE is going to expand that market. So South Korea will be able to diversify its export market. And so although people are looking at the end of 2026 when it comes to AI markets kind of starting to lose its steam, by actually also having another AI cooperation deal with the UAE, South Korea can export more. So it will be able to extend this AI boom.
So putting it into the picture and into the context of sovereign AI. So sovereign AI is something that Lee Jae-myung has pushed for ever since his presidential campaign. He's also pushed forward for that during APEC when he made that Nvidia deal with Jensen Huang. So where does this Stargate deal fit in here?
Okay, so regarding the sovereign AI ambition that President Lee Jae-myung has mentioned, it's not so much about Stargate UAE that's really going to help South Korea. In fact, there is very precious little that I can see that is actually going to boost South Korea's AI sovereignty, and that's because we have to go back to what the U.S. is doing.
Sure.
I just mentioned that the United States Commerce Department has approved sales of Blackwell chips to the UAE and Saudi Arabia, but these are conditional approvals. Conditional being that both Saudi Arabia and the UAE will have to really comply with U.S. regulations when it comes to data centers, how they train their data, and who they can export their chips to.
Which leaves a lot of little room to maneuver for South Korea.
Exactly, because in order for South Korea to gain access to those high-end chips, South Korea will also come under the very same kinds of conditions that Riyadh and Abu Dhabi are under. And so for now, at least, I think at least until South Korean companies are able to get their act together and no longer have to depend on U.S. technology, South Korea has no choice but to rely and really just adhere to U.S. regulations. And so if South Korean companies have to adhere to U.S. regulations, sovereign AI, that's pie in the sky.
So it's just words for now. So we also had quite a lot of words regarding the Lone Star deal that came out.
Oh boy, yeah.
So Prime Minister Kim Min-seok, he announced on Tuesday as well that the International Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, the ICSID, had nullified its 2022 order requiring the South Korean government to pay principal damages of $216.5 million US plus interest to Lone Star funds over the disputed sale of Korea Exchange Bank. This has been going on for almost a decade, right?
Okay, so for those of you who have not been living in Korea for a long time, this entire saga, this Lone Star saga, goes back 22 years.
Right.
Back in 2003, when South Korea was still recovering from the Asian financial crisis, when banks were in trouble, this is when all of these foreign hedge funds were able to come into Korea and buy up South Korean financial assets at a deep discount. And so Lone Star came into South Korea and bought KEB. And of course, being a hedge fund, it didn't want to run a bank. It wanted to make sure that it could just turn things around, make a profit, and sell it off to whoever wants to buy it next. And so they had a lot of prospective buyers. In the mid-2010s, they were talking to Kookmin Bank. They were also talking to HSBC. And they were all very interested in buying this. But at the time, the national narrative in South Korea was that these are foreign vultures coming in to just carve up the carcasses of South Korea's financial institutes and just sell everything off apart.
Sure.
The narrative was extremely nationalist. And so Lone Star alleged that the South Korean government put up these unreasonable regulations that slowed down negotiations, that prevented them from selling, from having politicized criminal investigations. And so, to be fair, when Lone Star did sell KEB, they sold it to Hana eventually. They did make a profit, but they're saying that they could not make. They could have made a much bigger amount of profit had the South Korean government not gotten itself involved. And so, eventually, long story short, Lone Star sued the South Korean government for about $4.7 billion. And in 2022, the arbitration ended up saying that, okay, yeah, sure, there is some merits to what Lone Star was alleging, but the South Korean government was not responsible for all of it, which is why the arbitration ruled in 2022 that South Korea has to pay about $270 million. Significantly less than what Lone Star wanted. And so both sides filed for annulment. Now, annulment is the key word here. Now, when Kim Min-seok was saying, the prime minister was saying that this ruling was an exoneration of South Korea's national sovereignty over financial issues, I could not.
Okay.
My eyes rolled so hard I could see the back of my brain.
Okay, yeah.
Because again, this was an annulment, and when it comes to these kinds of annulments, they can only annul the rulings based on procedural flaws.
Okay.
And so what that means is that because they said, okay, South Korea doesn't have to pay any damages, they're not saying that Lone Star was completely in the wrong. They're not saying that South Korea did nothing wrong. They're saying that the procedure behind the ruling was flawed. And so, yay, South Korea doesn't have to pay any damages. But the reputational damage is still there.
Right.
And that's the thing that the prime minister did not say anything about.
Well, yeah, I mean, politicians leave out what they want to leave out and say what they want to say. But, at the same time, when you look at the outlook of this, so as you said, the annulment, it could have removed some sort of short-term fiscal liability, but there is a risk.
There is significant risk, and that's because this is not the only international arbitration case we're talking about here. We're also talking about two other entities, Mason Capital and Elliott Management Investments. Now, again, this goes back a decade now. In 2015, when Samsung had that very controversial merger that allowed Lee Jae-yong to become the Samsung chairman, a lot of investors, small-time investors, like the ants, Kemi investors that we say in Korean, they lost a lot of money. But a lot of these hedge funds that had been invested in Samsung had also lost a lot of money. Now, Mason Capital won their arbitration, and just in April this year, the Ministry of Justice said that they would not appeal against the ruling. So they accepted that they were in the wrong. Now, Elliott Management, that's still a bit up in the air right now. I believe the last time it went up to the UK Court of Appeal, and they sided with South Korea, and it went down to the lower court. But this is still an active legal case, and especially with the UCSID case now saying that South Korea doesn't have to pay because of a procedural flaw and not because of what actually it did or did not do.
Right.
This means that the Elliott Management case that still has teeth, and it can really come back to bite South Korea.
Looking to stay informed about South Korea's fast-evolving political, business and cultural landscape? Join us on Korea Pro, the go-to resource for in-depth analysis expertly curated by top-tier professionals. And now you can pick the membership level that best suits your needs, thanks to our new subscription packages. Starting at just $199 annually, you can access daily analysis and our weekly podcast. Or try our premium membership package, which offers additional perks such as executive briefings, monthly reports and forecasts, networking receptions and event opportunities, as well as much, much more. To find the best fit for you, just head to signup.koreapro.org and become a member today.
Week ahead. So Lee continues his trip overseas. So he is in Cairo right now, I believe, and he's meeting with the Egyptian president, where he'll be having a meeting, and then he will continue his trip to Johannesburg. Well, he
For
will
the
be
G20 summit.
He'll be heading to the G20 summit and also Turkey, I believe, and he'll be ending his trip on November 26th.
That should be an interesting stopover, meeting with Turkish President Erdogan. Both countries have been really producing a lot of weapons, and Turkey is a drone powerhouse, really. And South Korea has a lot of ambitions to go into this. We have to see what kinds of defense cooperation deals that might come out with Turkey. So that would be quite something interesting to keep an eye on.
And South Korea will move forward with its space ambitions with the fourth launch of the Duriho. It's going to be happening on the 27th of November. That's next week, where they will be launching from the Kohung site in Eastern Korea.
Okay, and all of this information will be sent to your email inbox by Monday at 2 p.m. via the Weekend newsletter. So if you'd like to know more, please subscribe. Bye!
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We'll brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why it matters, delivered to your inbox every morning.
If you want to stay ahead of the curve, sign up for Korea Pro to get a full package of insights, from daily expert analysis to profiles, month in review, week ahead, and more.
And until next time, I'm Jungmin Kim.
I'm Joon Ha Park.
And I'm John Lee, and we'll see you next time on the Korea Pro Podcast.